Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be talking about this. It's a video session transferred to the channel 1. I'm going to be talking about the making the right call in complicated cataract surgery. So here, if you see this, this is cataract surgery by one of the colleagues. Got into complication. He called upon me to actually manage this complicated cases. When I saw the situation, there is almost 180 degrees zonular dialysis. I was not sure if there is capsular rupture or not. So in this situation, what you have to do, you cannot implant a tension ring because you are not sure if there is a rupture or not. So what we have to do is actually to be a safer decision, or the right call is to take the whole lens out. The challenge here was to go actually from side, because the zonular dialysis from away from the lesion, away from the incision. So removing the whole lens keeps the patient without any sulcus or any support to implant secondary IOL. My choice for secondary IOL is actually iris fixation, and for the iris fixation I use a modified technique where I implant the first trailing leading haptic first, keeping the trailing haptic outside for the actual safety, so the IOL doesn't go down. So once I put this leading haptic in, I sutured with the Prolene suture, usually either 10-0 or even 9-0. Once this haptic is secured in place, then even if the second haptic you have trouble, like sometimes going inside, you can't retrieve the lens. You don't have the lens, sunk into the vitreous cavity. So in my hand, I could do iris fixation in even, iris loss. If there is no more than like half of the iris is not lost, then we could do iris fixation. So this is also this hook modified it. There's a Sinisky. We modified it to take the the Prolene suture out. It grasped the Prolene suture easier. And what I prefer is actually suturing the Prolene suture from the one incision. That's probably make it easier. I'll go a little forward. I don't like a Sipser technique. I use this one. So once I suture this haptic, then I go for the trailing haptic. And now I have the leading haptic secured, so even if in case the IOL goes down, then I can retrieve it. So this is actually the iris fixation. The more challenging part is putting the trailing haptic under the iris while keeping the optic over the iris. Therefore, the size of the pupil is important. If it's too big, it actually doesn't keep the optic over the iris, but if it's too small also, it's difficult to get the haptic under the iris. So that's why if you notice me, I was just mechanically making the pupil a little smaller, so it keeps the haptic on the optic over the iris. And you do the same thing for the for the trailing haptic. You suture it in place, and then you push the optic under. The good thing about the iris fixation, the tilt is not there. It's not like the Yemeni. You are not afraid about the tilt. This is a different situation, also 100 degree of zonular weakness, but in this case we know there is no posterior capsular rupture. So the call here is actually to implant a capsular tension ring rather than taking the whole lens out, just like in the first scenario. In this scenario, we do a capsular excess in the center and we implant a capsular tension ring to stabilize the capsule. So once we stabilize the capsule, then you do everything like any cataract surgery. Here I opted to implant 3 pieces IOL just in case. Otherwise, you could also implant a 1-piece foldable in the bag. But just in case if there is any displacement, you could actually later on, if you have a 3 pieces in, to refixate again, just to be on safe side. This is another scenario where I have actually a posterior subcapsular cataract. This patient was a sister of a doctor. She asked me to come to OR with me to see her sister. I do surgery for her sister. So usually I let them to come in and see the surgery, and everything was straightforward surgery actually. Nothing was peculiar about here. Unless there is a posterior subcapsular cataract, I do routinely polishing. So when I was doing the polishing, I just noticed that I broke the capsule. And the problem is, if I get panic here and the sister doctor is there inside the OR, I mean, she will feel that something wrong happened. So I came out while I'm putting some viscoelastic in, so I don't have the vitreous prolapse. It's just the posterior capsular rupture without any vitreous prolapse. So if you notice here, the gap is here. So the idea here is, the right call here is actually to just change this posterior capsular hole into a curvilinear capsular rhexis without having the vitreous prolapse. So once you change this posterior capsular rupture into a curvilinear capsular rhexis, so you can even implant one piece foldable in the back, but you have to be careful it goes in the back. So if you see the curvilinear capsular rhexis, it's really well centered and round. So here it's just like any implanting a lens. It will be like any straightforward cataract surgery. Last case is actually phaco in a small pupil. It's sometimes good to put an iris hook, but for me, I noticed that I put iris hook or Malugin ring or any of the different type of capsular, pupil expander. Sometimes it causes a lot of distortion in the pupil. I have many cases where the sphincter is disturbed or the pupil is actually got distorted from the iris hook. So therefore, I try to actually complete the phaco in a small pupil without putting an iris hook. And this is the idea here, is to actually have the capsular rhexis under the iris. So if you make the capsular rhexis big, then the small pupil is not a hindrance, because the pupil always can expand while the capsule not. So if you can do a capsular rhexis under the iris, if you have a 3 or 4 millimeter pupil, then you can add 1 more millimeters, then you have a 4 to 5 millimeter capsular rhexis, then you don't have a problem. So you can take small pieces or quadrant of the nucleus outside of the small pupil because expand, and the same thing with the cortical removal. Sometimes you can use the irrigation to see what is left, and then inject an IOL because the pupil can expand. And probably it's not the right call for every surgeon. If you are not comfortable, then please put an iris hook or expanders. And thank you very much for your attention.